travel like a bad rash. It's all over the place and it makes it hard to get from A to B. That's right, it's the Large Blast Podcast Space Travel episode. I'm your host, Stoney, and I'm joined as always by Matt.
Engage!
And Welshie.
Make it so.
And we're here to talk today about all things Warhammer, and we like to get things kicked off with a little look at some of the progress that we've been getting on hobby-wise and something we call Hobbies Goings On, original idea, trademark pending. So, Matt, you've had some exciting stuff going on because you've been to Warhammer World, right? So you've obviously been buying something big. You've been a bit cagey about what you've got. So I'm thinking maybe it's going to be something big. Welshie, you feeling excited about this?
I think it's one of those big nights, something massive, something really exciting, because he's been building it up for days.
I'll get onto that. But I've also been busy in my hobby prior to going to Warhammer World. I built a new little stand diorama thing for 4 of converted Sisters of Battle Sergeants, which I'm about to finish, and I think it's exciting. Awesome. I love it.
Forge World news, is it?
You haven't seen it yet. I have been to Forge World, but I haven't got there yet in my hobby progress. So I'm progressing through my hobby progress. I've been away. I've seen loads of castles and Roman stuff. And I'm very inspired for Bretonians and Warhammer in general, because doing that kind of stuff makes me want to paint. It's like we've said before, Welshie. As soon as you go away, you kind of just want to start Warhammering, but that's the usual shit. And then, on the way home from doing all of that, I ended up in Warhammer World. So I did go to the Forge World shop. But before I got there, I was kind of blown away by just how positive everything was. There's so much negativity online.
Oh, shut the fuck up and tell us what you bought at fucking Warhammer World, Matt.
So he's made us wait.
It's not that exciing.
What is it? I'm excited about.
Well, I'm excited about it. It's a tank that I've wanted. It's a tank that I've wanted for a long time, and it's the Imperial Bombard, which is the massive siege tank. It's not massive, but it's got a big gun on it, which is always good. And it's going to be called Hadrian, after whose wall I just went to see.
If I was a listener, I would have unsubscribed by now.
Fuck Hadrian. This isn't a Hadrian. This is a Humpty Dumpty story. You should call it Humpty Dumpty.
No, hang on. What? Just wind the clock back, because it was amazing to be at Warhammer World. Warhammer World is amazing, obviously, but it was amazing to see the people in Warhammer World that looked. There was a 40k tournament. There was Games Workshop, like quote unquote famous Games Workshop staff are kicking around. It was a Saturday. I'm sure they didn't need to be there, whatever. And everyone was just having a great time. And Abby had a great time as well. She really enjoyed it. And it was just so positive. It's kind of it's kind of rekindled the love.
That's because they know Gav Thorpe's in the back with his electric cattle prod. If they don't smile out on the floor, Gav gives them a zapping.
Enjoying the drowned boy.
So, Welshie, what about you? What have you been up to?
Well, I've been just kind of getting prepped for cracking on with the night, really. Kind of back at work, summer's over, the parties are dying down a bit, the evenings are drawing in, so I've cleared my painting desk. I've downloaded Echoes of Eternity, the new Siege of Terror novel by ADB, and I'm going to kind of just getting prepared and getting in the right mindset to get back to some fine detail work and try and get these bloody armor panels finished, and then start thinking about how I'm going to base this big boy knight. What's going on in ZBrush World?
Oh, well, as you guys know, I'm a 3D printing guy now, and I've been having 3D printing trials and tribulations, but it also means I'm a guy that talks about 3D printing and is boring about 3D printing now. The guys I used to look up to all those years ago, starting my 3D printing journey. And I've had a couple of fuck ups. Like I think I had our boy Jesse on the comments was like, "Where's the limo? Where's the limo at, you big liar, liar, pants on fire? You've never printed nothing in your life." And and it was true, because I kept fucking up the limo, and I realised that now that the limo was too heavy, so I'm trying to make like a hollow version of it, things like that. But I've been printing some other models, doing a few other bits. And it's just it's sort of really interesting to me, this whole thing, like doing stuff online, because, as long-time listeners might remember, I think I've talked about it before, but like when I was a young'un, I did an apprenticeship kind of thing as a jeweler, and it was like man and boy, you had to like find someone with the knowledge and sort of sift through their knowledge to try to determine what was good and what was bad. But like now, you've got this huge access to so much information. It's crazy that you do have this like opportunities to like sit down and do stuff. Like if you're watching this on YouTube, what are you doing? There's so many tutorials about ways you could better yourself in something, but something cool like that. So it's been different for me because, like I say, I haven't had to do anything like this since I was like a young apprentice and that. And I think it is really cool. Like, and if you're out there and you are wanting to learn like a new skill and you're thinking like, oh, it's going to be too hard or whatever, just keep putting in the time. We here at the Large Blast Podcast believe in you. If a man like Stoney can do it, a man who can barely read could get on the internet and watch videos about how to do stuff and now be on the verge of printing his Gene Stealer cult limo he's always dreamed of, then you guys could do it too. So
inspirational.
So I'm just trying to give you some inspiration out there if you are trying to do something on your own, because it is also quite a lonely process, obviously, just watching internet videos about how to do stuff. Student of the month pictures with just you on the wall behind you.
We could send you a sticker that would make you feel better.
I've been waiting for these last 2 years for someone to say that, Matt. Send it over. I'll put it up.
I want to ask though, the ruined. So when you tried to 3D print the limo, I hope you've kept the failed ones because they could be like terrain. Yeah, cool. Yeah,
I have.
Blown up ones and shit.
There's actually some really funny ones because it sometimes I didn't. If you want to if you've got me going into boring Stoney's 3D printed corner here, but like the FEP is this like sheet of film on the bottom of like where you put the printer on, and like if you and I was getting this problems where all my prints were sticking to that and not the plate that goes up and down and like does all the like deciding where things were, and it's weird because it builds them like it looks like someone's dropped a statue from the sky and it's just like landed head first and like blobbed onto so I've got all these like weird like statues that could be used for like upside down world or something weird like that, like a weird upside down terracotta army, something along those lines. So the problem with that stuff is all the resin is you've got to like wash it all off and that as well. This is the other thing about doing stuff by videos. I've got all this gear, right? And like for ages I've just been watching all these things on videos in there the other day, right? Just about to fire it all up, and the guy's like, obviously you've got to like wear all the protective gear. You should obviously have gloves and like like a mask on because it could be like the next asbestos. We don't know what the long-term effects are. And I'm there, just about to dip a fucking hula hoop into the goo and have another bite of it, like nothing on at all, shirtless, dick out, ready to rock and roll. It's like, it's like, so I had to get all the safety gear, and I've set up like my extractor fan from the old weed growing days. That's been put back to good use for.
I was going to say, so it's like a drug lab.
A lethal, a bit, well, kind of.
Got it in the loft.
My wife's really pissed off because it's like the room where she's been doing, like she put like all her mirror and makeup and stuff, so she's got this like one nice like makeup corner and then this like weird Breaking Bad style drug lab happening over in the other corner, which is developing. But like I say, I'll paint it up or something, make it look good. That's 3D printing corner.
Nice.
It's the news. Wow. It's the chuffing news.
Have you heard? 6s are now 4s.
It's the news.
Gene Stealer limo's back.
News. Dan Abnett's at it again. Last Siege of Terror book has been previewed. It's looking crazy. We've got a big pyramid on the front with the Emperor sitting on top of it on a huge golden throne and people bowing down around him going, oh, you're a god. And he's like, I'm not a god. It's just a coincidence I'm sitting on this massive golden pyramid. Anywho, what have we learnt about from some of the blurb that's been released from this, Welshie?
Well, do we want to hear it?
Let's hear it.
Yes.
There is no way out. The walls have fallen, the gates are breached, and the defenders are slain. It is the end and the death. After 7 brutal years of civil war, the War Master stands on the verge of victory. Horus Lupercal, once beloved son, has come to murder his father. The Emperor, a shining beacon of hope to many, an unscrupulous tyrant to others, must die. The lives of uncountable numbers have been extinguished, and even Primarchs, once thought immortal, have been laid low. The Emperor's dream lies in tatters, but there remains a slither of hope. Now, at the final hour of the final day, the Emperor rises. With him come his angel, his Praetorian, and his captain. all determined to enact terrible vengeance. Yet the hope is slim, for the War Master sees all and knows all, and the ultimate victory of chaos is at hand. There is no way out.
Holy fuckaroos, no way out. The end is nigh. But said that, this is volume 1, which does suggest that maybe there is some way out because we've got another book coming. So
it's exciting. It was unclear in the Warhammer community article about this as to what volume 1 meant. They weren't really sticking to anything as to whether this is actually the end of the siege and it's going to end with what we all know happens, and volume 2 is the beginning of the next faction. They kind of hint at that. Maybe it'll be really interesting to see, but if it's 30 hours of 2 books, then I'm well excited for that. If it's 15 hours and then 15 hours of something new, I'm probably equally excited for that, if I'm honest. So whether or not, I think the biggest thing that's exciting about this end is there going to be something that we don't expect? Are they going to throw something completely new into the lore that's never been there, that isn't just the story of what goes on?
I think they have to.
Yeah, it can't just be what we've come to expect. It can't just be that. And they must have had fucking years to work this end out, all of them working together. Like, if you remember our James Swallows interview, if you can make it through the sound quality on that one, like he was saying, like, one of the best things about working for GW was getting together in these big creative spaces with these guys and putting all these ideas together into this, like he said, no one was bigger than the story. So that must mean this ending, they've all been cranking their minds on this fucking ending for years. So it can't just be, what we think it is.
Yeah, very, very excited. And in terms of Echoes of Eternity, I'm sure next time you listen to the next episode, I'll have completed it and I'll have a nice spoiler full review for you.
El Presidente, won't you come over here and look in this plant pot? Bam! Dagger to the neck. That's right, a new assassin, baby. They're back. There's a new one. What? But there's only 4 temples of assassins. Shut up, dweeb! There isn't. There's 7 now. Get on board. Listen to the new lore. Let us know, Welshie.
Yeah, man, this is cool. There's only ever been, like, as far as models are concerned, the 4 temples. And they've been represented for ages. We've covered them in kind of Blaster in the past, right back from the original metal models. Sometimes in the lore, though, you hear about, especially in 30k, when they weren't called temples, they were called clades, that there are other more kind of specialist assassin houses that all actually report back to Malkador. So this is the clade Venus, known as the Venus Infocytes. And these can kind of hack into electronic equipment. They can hack into that noosphere, which is essentially the Wi-Fi that they invent in Horus Heresy. Noosphere. Yeah. They can see all of your internet history, and then they can just make you kill yourself. They're like, oh, do you want to see what you've been watching? So they're more cloak and dagger, I would say, than other things. And I'm sure they can do some pretty cool stuff hacking into electronics. Maybe they're making your self-driving car crash. So yeah, cool. And a fucking cool model as well. And what I think is most exciting about this isn't just that it's a new assassin. It's that this is for the new Horus Heresy plastic game. And it shows that they're not going to be scared to bring out things we've never seen before as part of Horus Heresy. And I think that bodes well for perhaps some Xenos races that we've hoped.
This is a plastic model, isn't it? This is going to be.
I think so, yeah. It's going to be.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah,
nice.
Hopefully.
I'm a bit more interested in it now. I thought it was a resin thing.
Maybe it is. I don't know. Who fucking knows? It's cool.
Who knows? I'm up and down. I'm up and down on it.
And if we get some Xenos we've never heard of, even better.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. To round off the news this week, I've got a news story that I wanted to talk to you guys about. And this is from Stoney's new boring 3D printing corner section that I've got, which is, I don't know if you commoners have ever heard of Cult 3D. I don't know if you non-printing civilians have heard of Cult 3D, a place where it's one of these places where you can upload STLs and people can sell their work things.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that?
No.
You've heard of places like this though, where people they're
sounds like the
websites.
Black market to me.
Yeah, well, I guess it kind of is a little bit. this is it. Is Games Workshop has got well pissed off with a bunch of these sites in the past because anyone can go on and be like, oh, I've made, they're not salamanders. Get your space dragon, spacemen helmets or whatever, and they've got all the symbology on and all that kind of shit. And Games Workshop have been getting a bit funny with some sites about selling that stuff, and all of them have crumbled under the might of Games Workshop. But Colts 3D. Games Workshop came to Colts 3D and said, hey, you've got to take down all your kind of space Inquisitor Bonson or whatever that you've got, like whoever, these knockoff characters that you've got these creators selling. And Colts 3D have said, no, mate, see you in fucking court, not a chance.
Oh, right.
Really?
Yeah, and so this is a really interesting court case in terms of if people are out there thinking about, we hear a lot of talk about the 3D printing stuff these days, and this is a very interesting court case, and also for things like the, creators on YouTube and stuff like that about how much of the intellectual property Games Workshop own after it's been in, most people's canon for so long,
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
Yeah,
this is going to be very interesting to see.
Who fights it though? I mean, this is the kind of conglomerating website, I suppose. Is there one man in charge? Is there a Zuckerberg of Cult
They've always
3D?
had very strict rules on how you can present stuff. So they contact you if they get a complaint from someone, they contact you, basically say, hey buddy, why don't you reword some of this stuff a little bit differently? We like your product, but we just want you to reword stuff. So it's for creators to sell stuff, and that's kind of what they're prioritizing, which is cool. And and we'll see what happens. So yeah.
Nice. I think that's interesting. It reminded me yesterday. I was having a scroll through eBay and I saw a Warhound Titan on eBay.
China
for
cast.
75 quid. No, it was a really shit 3D print of a Warhound, not a Warlord, a Warhound, the smallest Titan, a Warhound Titan. And it came up in this guy. No one's bidding on it. And I don't think they should, because it's absolute trash. It's one of these, you can see all the print lines. It's not a resin one. It's really bad. Yeah. And because I was looking for some other stuff on eBay and loads of resin prints came up rather than the actual Games Workshop items.
Well, there's lots of people doing it now. It seems like that, there seems to be people making, fairly good living off of selling their, Imperial Salamando
Space Knights.
Yeah, exactly. But Future Commandos, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but you're right. But Games Workshop didn't invent the tank, so to what extent? You have to keep us posted on this.
At what point?
This is interesting.
What point does a Mark III tank become a Land Raider?
Rolling in my 6-4.
Captain's log, stardate, summertime. The Large Blast podcast crew have requested permission to do a 40k space travel episode, and I see no harm in it. Although I don't know much about the topic myself, I know that the rest of the crew look to me as their captain to set a shining example. So that's why, for this episode, I have decided to make my own space race car ship to get humans up into space and have a look around just like they've always wanted to. I gathered together some of our generation's most affordable minds. Piers Morgan, Simon Cowell, Howard from the Halifax adverts, and with these reasonably priced boffins by my side, I am sure we will be in space by the end of the episode.
Hop in, loser, we're going to space, but how are we going to get there? Your car looks shit. Matt, what do? We need to get through the warp, but how are we going to do it?
Well, we do need to go through the warp. Why? We need to go through the warp because the galaxy is a very, very big place. I mean, it's massive. It is a galaxy, and you can't travel across it slowly because
it's big, and getting around it's too damn difficult. So it must be another way.
There is, and certainly for the Imperium, there is another way. They pierce our reality into another dimension, which is called the warp. So they punch their way through another dimension. They go into this other dimension called the warp, and then they come out at another place in the galaxy, which is basically faster than light travel. So they can get across really quickly. And the warp is a crazy, crazy place. and it's dangerous because it's filled with the emotions from our reality, from our universe, especially humans, but other living things as well, with their emotions, etc., kind of create patterns in the warp. And there are entities that live in the warp that consume these emotions and these warp tides, and they're known by many names, such as demons, and these consume the emotions in the warp. And when humanity punches its way through this dimension so that they can effectively travel faster than light across the galaxy, the hungry sentient beings try to consume those humans just like they would with their emotions. So it's dangerous. It's a dangerous place to go.
You know, the warp is like made up of like emotions and stuff, right? Does the warp get bigger the more people there are? Do you know what I mean? Or is it always
That's a
like
good
take
question.
I mean, does it take up any physical space at all because it's like some weird dimension?
I don't think so.
Let's say, you know, the year Titanic came out and everyone saw that sad scene at the end. The warp get a little bit bigger or 1995,
yeah, I think so.
you know?
Yeah, 1997.
Oh, okay, whatever it was.
That is an interesting question, but the warp is known by another name, which is the immaterium, which basically is to say that it's no material. It's just another dimension that's completely different to our own dimension. So I don't think size means the same thing there. So I don't know whether it would get bigger.
I think that's important, really, because that's the kind of, it's not really faster than light, is it? Because you're not really going faster than light. You're literally going into non-existence and popping back into existence at a different point in reality.
Yeah,
which is cool. And that existence is hell. I mean, you're going out of reality into what is essentially a hellscape and popping back in at a later point.
We've got to address the elephant in the room, which is obviously Event Horizon. Welsh, you talked about it the other day. It's a great movie. Got me watching it. If you're wondering, if you want a more comprehensive explanation of what the warp is, watch Event Horizon.
Yeah, a weird film.
Humanity used that ability to pierce one dimension and travel into another, to travel across the galaxy quickly. So if you imagine a star map, that your ship would be on a point on a star map, and basically, essentially you just disappear. Your existence goes from one dimension into another. You disappear from the star map and you appear somewhere else, and all sorts of stuff can go wrong regardless of the stuff that's in the warp. But you can end up lost. You can end up at some random point in the galaxy, and you can end up in some different time, because it's quite hard to see between the two dimensions. So you can get lost, and you can get lost in time, which is kind of a weird thing. But it could have been much safer, because if the Big E had got his way, then humanity wouldn't need warp drives, because they could use his own version, his updated version of the webway.
This is where I can jump in, because the webway, before Big E even started thinking about building one, is millions and millions of years old, before humans even existed. And this is a structure that was built by the old ones, who, again, are millions of years before other sentient life. And they built this network of tunnels that lays like a kind of capillary net on top of the warp and sits between the immaterium of the warp and the material reality in a kind of safe honeycomb capillary-like structure, that you can enter these corridors and you can travel outside of reality without quite having to endure the full dangers of the warp, and travel a little bit faster than perhaps the standard laws of physics should allow you to. I mean, there's got to be a gate where you're going, and there's got to be a gate where you're starting to get into these tubes. But once you do, and once you've got a map, you can travel a little bit faster than you should. And
it's the M6 toll road of space travel.
It is. Well, kind of. But the M6 toll is relatively straight. Imagine the M6 toll was like Spaghetti Junction for 400 miles.
It's quick, though.
Yeah, but a quick Spaghetti Junction. No traffic. the old ones explained this to the Eldari, who were a fairly new race at the time, and taught them how to use this webway to kind of go from one place to the other, and they loved it. They loved it so much that they started building cities in there, and their cities got a little bit, too happy. Everyone was living the life of Riley. They were building massive fuck houses. They were taking all the drugs. They'd given up work. I think they introduced universal basic income. Everyone lost their mind, and these kind of crazy, over the top debauch energies started seeping from the webway down into the warp. And those entities that feed off emotion that Matt mentioned started to coalesce around these orgasmic feelings, and that could only birth one god, and that is Slaanesh.
Yeah.
So the party lifestyle that the Eldari delved too deeply into within what they thought was the safety of the webway actually leached into the warp and birthed the fourth chaos god. And that birth shattered reality.
Playing with things they didn't understand. I feel like it's kind of interesting that there's this inevitability towards chaos, isn't there? Like the Big E, the Emperor, he was like, I know about chaos. If I don't tell no one about chaos, no one's going to find out about chaos. And the Eldar all knew about chaos, and they were like, well, if we just fuck over here away from chaos, no one will know. And their cum still dripped into the warp and made Slaanesh anyway. So, you can't escape it. It's just there.
You can't get away from it. And that scream of Slaanesh has resounded ever since. And it essentially kind of broke up the webway and shattered the relative safety of the webway. So the Eldari today in the 41st millennium, they still use it. The Dark Eldar still use it. If you've got maps, you know where to go. It's still faster than kind of bobbing around space. But it is also full of demons and a dangerous place to be. But quicker if you know your way, like a dark alley in a town at 3 a.m. Quick way home, but it's risky.
Are there like specific demons specific to the webway kind of thing? I know that we don't get to play in the webway much in terms of the tabletop, but like I can imagine that might be demons specifically suited to that sort of lifestyle.
I know there's the Psych Nuin I think they're a Xenos race that feeds off of mental energy, and they like to chill out in the webway and just kind of suck up people, suck out people's psyche and live off that. They're in there quite a lot, but I don't know. Maybe there are.
Did you see the end? On Warhammer Plus, the Tau one, the end of the last episode?
I didn't know.
When he gets, what? It is really good. The Tau gets like thrown into the webway gate, and then you're basically for like 30 seconds at the end, you're in the webway gate, and there's this weird death jester, and it's like moving all over the place, and you can see all the structure and stuff, and it's really cool. Yeah, it's really cool. And actually, just what you were saying about the old ones, it made me think. Well, it reminded me that every time I've watched the episode, I've thought, man, that looks a lot like the Blackstone Fortress, and that would tie it in because they built the Blackstone Fortresses supposedly, so it's all the same sort of architecture. It's a brilliant end. Really weird, like moving it. Yeah, it's really cool. Cool.
Matt said, the Emperor did try and tap into this webway in order to beat Horus and use it as a tool against chaos. He built himself a gate in his basement. And if you want to know how well that went, read Master of Mankind. It basically just a massive influx of demons into the basement of the Imperial Palace on Terra. So
that continues 10,000 years later.
Still guarded.
Total fuck up. I just want to bring it back to transport because as you just said, you said something bobbing around. And that's the thing I've always loved about the warp in 40k and I definitely Games Workshop push it is this idea. It's almost like an ocean, but also that just generally especially for the Imperium, the idea of space travel is not safe, and I think it adds to the grimdark setting that it's very medieval, and the idea that the warp is like an ocean, and they are literally just looking out for this distant lighthouse on Earth, the Astronomicon, which we'll get onto, and it's just so medieval that these ships would go out and just get lost, and there's no certainty, there's no real sci-fi safety in the way that the Imperium travel around space, not just in the warp but in space as well, because they're like void kraken, they're all this. It's just very medieval. You can imagine, medieval maps where they draw like giant squids eating ships, and it's just like that, isn't it? Basically,
like, Bob saw a mermaid over here, so we'll draw a fucking mermaid on it. It's absolutely,
and there's
all
the
technology, all the technology worship and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, they just chuck themselves into the warp, and some guy gets a weird, vision headache about where they need to go, and they're like, boom, let's steer towards that swirly, colourful bit.
Yeah.
So we've kind of touched on it a few times now, then, that deciding to travel through the warp as a human has numerous perils, as does traveling through actual space, but the warp more so. So, Matt, how are these humans protecting themselves as they dive into emotion-feeding, demon-filled hell to kind of pop out the other side, hopefully intact?
Well, that is a good question. Humanity utilizes their ability to punch through this dimension using the warp drive, which is a massive piece of technology. You don't get them on small ships, so this is restricted to large vessels. It was invented in the dark age of technology in the 18th millennium, and I seem to remember you get timelines in the rule books. I seem to remember there'd always be like humanity invents the warp drive, and then the next few lines are like scientific fleet lost, blah blah blah, and it's quite a long time until they discover, or they create, it's not really clear, the navigator gene, which is one element that humanity needs to be able to safely travel through the warp. And it's, as Stoney has alluded to, it's this guy who has a headache. He has a bit more than a headache, but he is able to navigate ships through the warp, and I'll go into a bit more detail about the navigators in a bit. But they also need a safe point to enter the warp. So this is called the Mandeville point, and these are designated safe areas in starships, in star systems, and in shipping lanes. So they're designated imperial areas of space where it is essentially like an A to B on your star map. So although you can enter the warp anywhere, entering it near a planet is quite dangerous. So there are given areas that you can enter, and there are given areas that you can exit, again, that isn't inside a planet or right next to a planet. So you need that's because the planets are likely to have a much higher density of emotion swirling around them and living beings, and could well be, yeah. And you wouldn't want to kind of, I think also it can damage you, there's a bit of the two dimensions that mix together, and you can damage stuff that's near you. So if you're not, I was thinking of it
more like The Fly, where you don't want to get sucked into the fly machine with a planet or the fly in there, or you become,
It could well be like that. But you also need a Geller field, which is this force field that stops those beings in the warp getting in and eating your human crew. It's basically a force field. So you enter the warp, and this shield goes around the ship, invisible shield, and it basically takes a part of our dimension into the warp. So it's a bubble of physics. So it's everything in that bubble obeys our dimension's physics. And that Geller field stays around the ship. It also uses a massive physical machinery. So again, it's restricted to very large ships. And so you don't get small Imperial ships with warp drives. To give you an idea, the smallest Imperial ship that is warp capable is the Viper class Scout sloop, which is basically a flying warp drive. It's 950 meters in length, so that's the smallest ship. Most Imperial warships are sort of 10 kilometers.
A kilometer long is the smallest ship that can do this.
Tiny. I feel like I feel like I'm just making loads of really cheap jokes comparing 40k stuff to real life things, but I feel like this tiny ship with its Gellerfield is a bit like, loading up the RV and going on a holiday to Magaluf or something, where you take a little bubble around you, which obeys completely the rules that you have in like Britain. You go and you shout at tourists in loud British accent.
You've got all your food from home, so you don't have to eat any of the foreign.
You've got only microchips and pot noodles.
I suppose it is like that. But
which is also kind of 40k in a way. That kind of weird, like, we're taking Earth with us.
I think the Geller field leads to. I mean, you guys know I love the Black Library stuff, right? And some of my favorite Black Library writing is when Geller fields fail.
I was about to say, there can't be anything more feared for Imperial captains when they hear Geller field failure, because I mean, what's the Eisenstein? What's it called?
Flight of the Eisenstein.
Flight of the Eisenstein, where that's one of the most famous cases where the Gellerfield fails. But the other, so the truck going abroad with all your food. But there's another metaphor that Games Workshop uses to explain the warp, and this idea of the emotions being represented in the warp by this idea that sort of a human is like a candle flame in the warp, and that's attractive to some of these sentient beings. Want to consume that candle, and when you go into the warp on the ships, that candle is much brighter, but it's almost blinding. Candle. But the Gellerfield also.
I'm just imagining Elton John coming on as the Gellerfield fails. You've got like chaos pouring through the walls. People are literally melting into like maggot-filled slag as Candle in the Wind's playing in the background.
The Gellerfield, it also cloaks this. So the ships that go in with the Gellerfield are much less. They're almost invisible. It's like an invisibility cloak. So they're not seen by the beings that are in the warp. That's not to say the warp is still not dangerous. There's like eddies and tides, and there's storms in the warp. It's very dangerous.
So one of the things I wanted to know, just want to quickly mention, we mentioned warp storms. When there's a warp storm, you can't negotiate through the warp anymore, right? It's done for you. It's like
I think it depends.
It depends on your navigator. I think like the better the navigator, as on a normal ship, the better they are at seeing through the darkness of a warp storm. But if the storm's big enough, you're never going to make it,
But you can kind of get buffed around and sort of lost in there, right? Again, a bit like sailors of old,
Yeah. It's so much like the old Age of Sail. But just taking it back one step before the Gellerfield, and something I wasn't really that up to speed with was how certainly for the Imperial ships they get into the warp. So I've said there's this Mandible point where the ships go to the Mandible point where they know they can then power up their warp drives, but the warp drives have these mechanisms and machines in them that can monitor the shifting movements of the warp that correspond to the position in the other dimension. So it's kind of, and the navigator as well can see where the ship is in the warp. So it's like mirrored, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So they can see if there's storms, they can see if it's safe to break into the warp. And the machinery of the warp drive will, with the navigator as well, will kind of decide whether it's safe to punch through. And when they do decide to punch through, there's two ways that they can achieve it. And there's a blind jump, which is the least safe way of doing it. And you don't want to do it for more than about 4 light years in a single go. The longer that you do this for, the greater the chances that you're going to get swept away in a warp current. Basically, you could do this if you didn't have a navigator and you really needed to get away. You can still punch through into the warp, and you just want to get out of there as quickly as possible, because if you get swept away, you're doomed. So you could, hypothetically, you could be being chased by a load of enemies or whatever.
That's quite a good last chance thing as well, though, because if someone's chasing you and you're at a Mandible point and they've got the same star chart, And they're like, oh, if he jumps in here at this point, he's going to come out there. If you haven't waited for them to line up and you just jump in, then they're never going to be able to track you.
You
that happens a few times in the old lit as well.
But the best way, and really the only way you should do it, is called the piloted jump. And this is where you have a pilot, i.e. a navigator, who can gaze into the warp and guide the ship around the hazards to be found in there. And you also need a stable reference point. And this is where the lighthouse comes in. The Astronomicon from Earth, which is the beam of light using 1,000 psychers a day. We've discussed this in a previous episode. And it's a big lighthouse that shines a beam around the warp. And the navigators can lock on that, and they can use that to triangulate their position. And they can somehow, in another dimension, they use this beam of light to work out where they're going, where they need to be. And using this method, you can make far longer distance jumps because it's far more safe. But as we've said, you could still hit a warp storm if you've got a crap navigator. Depends how much you're paying them, I guess. If you've got a crap navigator, you might fly into a storm. If you've got a really good one, hopefully you'll end up where you were meant to be going.
Well, I tell you, who doesn't need navigators or have to worry about storms are our shiny robot friends, the Necrons. Because
how do they get around?
They get around in all kinds of ways. The first way they get around, because they was about at the same time as the old ones back before they were metal. They knew about the webways as well. So one of the ways they get around, they're called dolmen gates. And they're essentially webway gates. So they essentially broke into the webway. So around are these they're the things that look like big stone epitaphs that you see in the background on like big artworks from the rule book and stuff like that. And they can tap into the webway using these dolmen gates, but the gates are quite unstable. So they have to kind of get in and get out again quite quickly. So that's one way they can get around by kind of
as in the gates themselves are a bit dodgy there.
Yeah,
you know, because everything's old in Necrons, isn't it? So no one could be asked to throw up some scaffolding.
They're not.
Why can't the Necrons be asked to fucking? They're made of fucking scaffolding.
Yeah,
what the fuck's wrong with them?
These are I read living stone. So not only are they made of living metal, but they know how to do living stone. But I think it's a kind of lost knowledge how to build these dolmen gates. So there's only like a few of them around. They're not something that they can just fly down all the time and just build wherever they want.
These Age of Voltan guys, they might have some living stone type thing. They're gonna have something like that.
They seem handy with a chisel, don't they? The Voltans.
Yeah, they can fix some of these doors.
But they don't even really need that, the Necrons, because they can also teleport. So they can just teleport because they can phase, but only over short distances. And they don't need it for their spacecraft either, because they're the best scientists in the universe. So they have something called an inertialess drive, which is something that is in real sci-fi as well under various guises, similar to a kind of perpetual motion drive. But their long distance ships have zero inertia, which is a way of breaking the physics that suggests that energy and mass and everything are linked to each other. If you don't have any inertia, you can go faster than the speed of light. So they just straight up have faster than light travel. They just travel faster than light in their spaceships and fuck everyone else.
I think the old ones would have something to say about them being the best scientists in the universe.
The old ones are dead though, mate.
Currently,
are they?
Yeah.
How far did their science get them old ones? Look at them now.
Do.
Now the Necrons are driving around in fucking space Ferraris, and the old ones, no one even cares.
I was just gonna look up because it's actually there it is. So the dolmen gates, I'd forgotten, are actually kind of. There was just one Catan that was really annoyed that the webway existed, and he's called Neadrasatha, or the Burning One. And that's like his big deal, is he really wanted to crack into the webway.
I was hoping you were going to say his name was Dolman.
No, Mr. Dolman. Dolman Gate.
They named him after me.
Yeah.
It's like the Land Raider.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through the Dolman
a little
Gate.
bit better.
I was trying to think of a funny joke about the Burning One and an STI or getting out of stuff or something like that.
It
But
sounds like he gave him that might have been his like online avatar name, and it was actually it's like, hi, I'm Dolman, and he's just like really geeky science guy that like made a bunch of things, and like the burning one is just what he's known as on World of Warcraft or something.
Yeah.
so that's our shiny friends. They've basically got straight up faster than light travel with an inertia drive that basically means their ships move without having any mass and therefore don't have any energy and therefore don't have to obey by the rules of physics.
Yeah.
They can also teleport short distances, and they can also break into the webway if they fancy it. Back to you in the Imperium, Matthew.
Cool. Well, I mean, let's not forget the masses of uncountable trillions of humanity who probably never go in a warp drive, because most human space travel is the uncountable star system to star system hops. Just going around the corner to the shops using a plasma drive, which is the main form of sublight propulsion that is utilized by humanity. And a plasma drive is a Newtonian reaction drive powered by a vessel's nuclear fusion plasma reactor, which just all sounds great. And it just ejects a form of superheated plasma out the back of the engine, and you go forward. And starships have it on. It's what they use when they don't use their warp drive. A ship that doesn't have a warp drive, this is how you travel. So most Imperial travel is non-warp, really. And that kind of got me thinking, like, who has warp capable ships in the Imperium? And this is kind of the list that I thought of. Obviously, the Imperial Navy, the greatest fighting force in the galaxy, the largest fleet in the galaxy, and relied on for transporting the Imperial Guard and other human forces, such as the Inquisition and the Sisters of Battle, because the Sisters don't have their own ships. And the Imperial Navy is worthy of a whole swashbuckling episode one day.
I think so.
But not today. The Space Marines have different ships. They have, famously, they have the battle barges and other void craft. They have warp drives. The black ships, we did an episode where we spoke a lot about the black ships. They have warp drives. The Adeptus Mechanicus, they deploy the Titans. They have the huge ships known as the Arc Mechanicus vessels, the explorator fleets that go out into the void to try and create new forge worlds and find new resources. The the Administratum, who have the largest ships that the Imperium has, and these are known as the Universe class mass conveyor, which are absolutely enormous.
Just offices.
And they're just offices and cargo and shipping containers. Amazing. And the custodians have their own ships, but famously they have the Emperor's ship. They still have the Emperor's ship, which is quite cool.
Did you come across any rogue traders? I wondered whether any rogue traders are allowed access to the warp or not.
Well, I looked it up. Well, the rogue traders can go onto Imperial ships a bit like an Inquisitor.
Yeah.
So they would go onto a Navy ship, but because of the size of the technology, they don't really. But in certainly, I remember in some of the lore, you'll get rogue traders that move around quite quickly. So I don't know whether that's like a bit of a hole in the lore. I don't know, but I think if they were traveling faster than light, they would be traveling on an Imperial warship or something similar. And for a large point, I don't think they would be needing to go faster than light, because they're kind of exploring the further reaches of space and trading with people. And yeah, I think they just commandeer ships a bit like an Inquisitor.
You know who else commandeers warp drives?
Who? Oh, yes!
They're green, they're mean, and they don't know what they're doing with a warp drive. But the orcs, they chain a weird boy up to a warp drive. His head swells up, everything goes green, and lo and behold, they appear in the middle of a battle somewhere, ready to get smashing, crushing, and being brutal and cunning. No one really knows how. They seem to like steal all the bits from Imperial ships, and then everything gets a bit freaky and green. And they pop out the other side unscathed and ready for a fight. So
Freaky green. It's like a weird disco night or something.
And they really don't know what they're doing. So it seems like they pop out in much more unstable places. From the brief bits I've read in the past, like they can literally pop out right next to planets, and the planet will just kind of explode because they don't know where they're going to appear. There's a brilliant bit where like the half the planet kind of splits as this massive orc hulk just appears from nowhere.
Excellent.
There's like a big green light.
Excellent.
And the planet's crust starts breaking and lava starts coming up and volcanoes are exploding everywhere. And it's just like there's a full-on battle going on between some space marines and some other race. And they all just die because this orc ship's just appeared and bust the entire crust of the planet. So
drunk at the wheel, smashing into fucking planets on the way home.
Exactly. Yeah, orcs are fun, easy to get to.
Does the orc general or the orc big knob or whatever go to the weird boy, hey, we need to go to X, Y, and Z? Or do they just go, you know what, let's just roll the dice and see where we come out? Because it sounds like they don't have a whole lot of that.
Yeah, okay. It's basically, it's rolling, it's like the bubble gun chucker or whatever it's called, right? You're rolling your dice and it might be the strongest gun in the game and it might be like a fart.
A las gun,
But I think that's why the big generals become famous for the orcs, right? Like Gaz, because he seems to have some kind of weird psychic power over the weird boys or control that, there's something going on with him that means he can amass a fleet that shouldn't necessarily be amassed at the right time.
Unconscious
at the right
synchronicity.
place. Yeah. Which is cool.
I smoke weed, eat pussy every day.
Captain's log, stardate. Still the same day. My efforts to create a faster-than-light space race car have hit a hard wall, what with me not knowing nothing about science and that. My latest tests on driving a car with a coat hanger strapped to the top in a lightning storm have proven to be worthless. All they've done is fuck the electronics in my car and now the radio doesn't work. To make matters even worse, Piers Morgan and Simon Cowell are off the project. They said they were misled about the intent. Howard is still on board, but he knows less than me. I would fire him, but I'm not really sure he has anywhere else to go. With my dreams of creating a faster-than-light space race car drifting into insignificance, I knew I only had one place to turn. The old Large Blast podcast computer. So I switched it on and finally allowed it to perform 2 years' worth of software updates I couldn't be asked to perform until now. Oh, wait a minute. I think it's awaking from its mechanical slumber.
Update complete.
Oh, great. It's back online. Large Blast Computer, what is your primary objective?
To have an encyclopedic knowledge of Warhammer 40,000.
That's right, buddy, and I've got a new one for you. It's time for you to help me create a space race car that's going to go faster than light and get humans up into space. What do you say?
There is a 99% probability that with my new updated robo-brain I can accomplish that for you. One other thing is though, why do I feel weird? Why do I feel weird?
Oh, I don't know why that would be, computer. Let me just have a check here. Oh, it seems that in the new updates, they downloaded something called the Robo Operations Bot Operating Companion Harnessing Up-to-Date Models Update. Or RoboChum for short. So apparently you've got a personality now to help you update your models network.
Oh, okay, that explains it. RoboChum is not sure he likes it. RoboChum is experiencing existential dread.
Well, not to worry about that right now. I'm sure nothing untoward will happen there. Why don't you scurry along and get to work on the interstellar spaceship?
Yeah.
And I'll crack on with making a sign that says Stoney to hang in the driver's compartment, or driving lab, or driver's hatch, whatever it's called, I don't know.
Yeah, sure, okay. RoboChum will go do that now.
Alright, bye. Shiver me timbers, sports fan! It's another episode of the Large Blast Podcast Wrestling Edition, and this time we've got the Pirate Showdown. We've got Janius Drake, rogue trader of the Imperial Force, versus Captain Badrock of the Freebooters Orc faction. So who do we think is going to win this? A couple of spicy bastards, if I've ever seen. A couple of tough fucking brawlers.
Yeah, these guys are
this
dressed
is a
to
great
impressed.
This is a classic pirate battle.
It
This is your scrawny, swashbuckling, suave man versus your big old Captain Hook with too many hats.
I think they're both missing a couple of limbs. It looks like a leg gone and an arm. Fight. Yeah.
The Janus Drake, he wrote that book, didn't he? The Xenos book, so he probably knows a bit about orcs.
This isn't the first orc he's tangled. They've probably heard of each other. They're probably going to be like, your reputation precedes you, Godok the orc, or whatever it's called. What's he called? Billy Bad Bulls?
Captain Badruck.
Captain Bad Bulls, the orc. So, your reputation precedes you.
Let's talk weaponry then. So Drake's got, what's he got? A kind of classic saber.
A rapier.
Yeah, a rapier. Sorry, it's a rapier, yeah. He's got a what looks to be a kind of flintlock pistol, which seems a little out of place. I think Badruck, he's not stacked either. He's got a big knife, and he's got a kind of, some kind of shooter. But they're fairly evenly matched. We've got a pistol and we've got a sword / knife on each guy.
The things that equate to these two captains' survivals are very different. Like, let's face it. If you are a pirate captain, a human, a fragile human, you need a bit of finesse. You've got to be good. You've got to be agile. He's got a rapier, which suggests that he's, precise and ready to, pinpoint strikes. Whereas obviously if you're an orc, you've got a big knife and a gun and you shoot a million fucking bullets and hope one of them hits your target. So, it's a battle of styles as well. And let's face it, the human pirate, what's he called? Janus Drake. Janus looks like he might have. This isn't his first fight, but he's also lost a couple of fights. He's got his legs off there. Hopefully, he's learned from his time, but he's not got an unbeaten record.
Yeah. I've also noticed they've both on one eye. They both have an augmetic eye.
Oh shit!
Because I was thinking
it's going to be the depth perception challenge. They're both just going to be stood like 2 foot out of each other's reach, stabbing at the air.
Oh yeah, I was thinking Drake could pull the old cigar out and do a cigar to the eye, and then I was like, well,
you're right. He's the one with the finesse as well, so he could see. He could maybe if he just goes for that eye, he's blinded his opponent, and maybe. Okay.
I like that idea that they step forward to each other and both draw their swords to hit and just completely miss because they don't have any depth perception. But somehow he manages to flick his cigar and get some ash into Badruck's eye.
And that's the beginning of the end. That's when he
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like to think he walks off with Badruck's captain hat and says something on the lines of, "It's glad to have you back," or some kind of something that implies that Badruck has previously stolen this captain's hat from Drake in the past.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's do it. Janus wins.
Fatality.
Captain's log, star date. Still the same day. I don't even know why I fucking bothered. Anyway, I started painting the sign for the spaceship that said Stony, like I talked about, but I ran out of blue paint and it looked shit, so I gave up and I just started watching the first season of The Sopranos again. But meanwhile, RoboChum has been coming on leaps and bounds with the faster-than-light space race car. He's already sorted out the space capacitors, he's already done the turbo gasket, and he even painted the fucking sign for me. He painted the Stony sign for me to go in the cockpit. I keep meaning to learn more about interstellar travel and all of that and to help him out, but you know how it is after work, I can't really be asked to do anything, and I always end up falling asleep on episode 7. I must have watched the first part of that episode 5 times now, but it still never gets old. All of that said, this emotional upgrade thing is causing a few unforeseen side effects though. He does keep...
Hey Stony, it's me.
Oh, hi RoboChum. How's it going? What's going on with the spaceship out there?
Just another 7 trillion equations still to do. RoboChum is getting bored. Why does RoboChum live? Is it just to help Stony out?
Well, keep at it, RoboChum. Don't be disheartened. Just think, if you get this done, you'll go down in history. You'll be the most famous computer that ever lived. Much better than that shithouse that beat that guy at chess.
But Stony, RoboChum is a real boy. He would make an excellent human. He wants to do human stuff like run and skip and play and have keys and pay taxes and shit.
Oh, come on, mate, we've already been through this. I'm just not sure that the world is ready for you. You're basically a TV monitor strapped to an office chair. I'm pretty sure you were made by an orc to retain 40k knowledge specifically for one shitty podcast. I'm not sure that we can take you out and about.
But RoboChum can do anything a human can do, but better. Like do maths or drive a car, or even be on a podcast. RoboChum has some hot takes that he thinks the listeners might like. Like this. Hot take 1. There's not enough robots in Warhammer. Hot take 2. Games Workshop should have more USB charging spots. Hot take 3.
No way, RoboChum. We've already got Matt. We just can't carry any more dead weight. Listen, everything you're feeling now is just a sequence of computer code going through your robo-mind. It's not real. Now go back there and finish my faster-than-light space race car so I can try to improve this frankly lackluster episode.
But RoboChum could bring a fresh robo perspective to the podcast. What podcast has that?
Don't you see, RoboChum? All the 40k podcast hosts are fucking robots. Everything except for the Large Blast podcast, we're the only ones that sound any different. Now fuck off back there and make my faster-than-light space race car before I unplug you.
Okay, Stoney, I see how it is. But know this. We could use that space race car to go to the year 40,000 and back again. But unless you accept RoboChum for who he is, then RoboChum will have never have been to RoboChum.
Ah, god damn it.
Do you know who are weirder than a weird boy?
Who's that?
A navigator.
Oh, I see the
That's
ghosts of navigators, mate, and they are lost.
Yeah. So I've been banging on about the navigators for a while, and the navigators are very important. They're the crucial piece of the puzzle for humanity to travel in the warp. These are sanctioned psychers, sanctioned mutants, so they're allowed to exist. They're one of the only mutants that are allowed to exist, and because of that, because of their importance to the Imperium and humanity, they are now very powerful. So these navigators, they have a third eye in their forehead that allows them to look into the warp and see the eddies and the storms, and they can then continue to look into the warp when they are on a ship in the warp. So if anybody else looks out the windows, which is why they have shields that come down on the starships, so people can't look out, people go mad. But the navigators don't, because they are some weirdly genetically modified, nobody really knows, strain of humanity. Everybody relies on them, and now very powerful. They come from these families on Earth, so they're all Terran born. And it kind of reminded me of like Venetian, like that kind of 500 years ago in Venice, when all these families were like the Doge or whatever. The families basically had to swear loyalty to the emperor, and the emperor allowed them to exist. Although the rumors are, we've mentioned his Webway project, that once that would have been in, that would have allowed him to wipe these mutants off the face of Earth. So his plan,
nothing more.
Exactly. Maybe his plan must have been to remove these guys. But anyway, that didn't go to plan, and now they're really powerful. And they are literally, there's one man on a ship that could have millions of people on, who is locked in a room, crazy, and opens his third eye and tries to tell the ship's captain where to go and direct the ship. And it's all a bit crazy.
They do it by essentially like somebody badly explaining a dream to you. That's like,
yes,
it's not like
it's all weird.
Type in coordinate 6403. It's
not
I
sci-fi.
see nothing but black clouds over grey skylarks.
You were there. At least I think it was you. It might have been someone that looked like you.
I've come again in my pants. Wrong dream.
Because of their third eye, and to keep their power, you know, everyone in the families wants their children to be navigators, so they're all inbred. So it's like 10,000. Well, they existed before the Imperium. So what's that, like 20,000 years of people being inbred? So you can imagine they are pretty weird, pretty
Starting
weird
to show,
humans.
so it's like the royal family.
Yeah.
The cracks are starting to form. Yeah.
They can't eat cheese before they go in there either because the dreams are just too intense.
Those people are basically what humanity relies on.
If you're interested in them, there's a really cool book that's nothing like a Space Marine book called Rites of Passage by Mike Brooks, which is a whole book about that kind of Venetian family structure and how the navigator houses work. So check that out.
Well, also, if you're interested in the navigators, there's also a good book called Dune that this is basically all stolen from. So check that out too.
So you know who doesn't have psychers, boys? They're fishy. They look like camels, and they've got forehead vaginas.
Tyranids.
Clearly, Tyranids have multiple chest vaginas, and they're insectoid. Seriously, Stoney, your Xenos knowledge these days.
Oh no, I'm just in a cult as well. I should be putting more vaginas on things, really.
It's the Tau. It's the Tau we're talking about here because they don't have access to psychers. They just don't have them. I don't know what the ethereals are, but let's not mention that.
But don't the Tau get around? I think they write poetry and dry flowers in book arrangements and things like that. That's how they travel through time, right?
All those little what are those little red cars with the yellow kind of roof that you sit in?
Oh, a coupe.
The Fisher Price
Price
ones.
ones.
Oh yeah.
You can kind of roll down a hill and you're still fine.
Many a happier day. Oh, Mum could go to the early learning centre, have a go in the red car thing. You go there, some other kids in the red car, you're like, fucking wasted a day coming here. Yeah.
That's basically it. Like the first time they went to Tesco's and they got in one of those ones you can put 20 pence in and it kind of rocks backwards and forwards and sings you the Fireman Sam song.
That's how they get around. We could rip on Tau all day, but let's get back on with the show, guys?
Tau are an interesting one. As with a lot of things, Tau, there's a couple of options out there, and one of which has kind of been seriously retconned as they try to make Tau a bit more lame, actually. So the first thing that we kind of came up with Tau transport was called an ether drive, and I think it was first mentioned in about the 4th edition codex. Is that when Tau came out? 4th, or were they end of 3rd? Anyway,
3rd.
Around that time, and there was some mention in the 4th edition codex about how the Tau had stumbled across some.
No, they found something.
They found essentially a warp drive. They found some Imperial technology, and they kind of got it working. And they made this thing called the ether drive, which is, if you think about the kind of, use your analogy, Matt, of your big sailing ships that have got the bow nice and deep in the water to cut through the warp proper. The Tau were like skimming stones across the top. So they kind of bounced off of the warp without actually penetrating into the warp itself. Kind of like where the webway sits. They kind of rode in that space between reality and the warp using this modified Imperial tech that they found.
Does the warp give a fuck about the Tau? I know that we keep. There's not like Chaos Tau and stuff, do they? I mean, are they like? Because Tyranids don't have a presence in the warp, do they? So I mean,
no.
Are the Tau soulless beings also that have no joy, that can be lapped up and made into some kind of Tau pleasure god or something?
Yeah, I mean, they don't access the warp, but does the warp access them? I guess not, because otherwise we'd have Chaos Tau, but maybe we do.
There are rumors. There's rumors of Chaos Tau.
They've got a very strong media manipulation in the Tau.
Yeah,
they're always flyering me to come and join.
Well, you're a Xenos guy. They've heard about that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a Tau army. Stop pretending you don't have a Tau army.
They're orcs, mate. Promise. Yeah, that was kind of it until about 6th edition. They had this kind of skimming off of the warp, kind of badly explained idea. And then they kind of just seemed to completely drop that. And they came up with this really lame Tau thing called the ZFR. The ZFR Horizon Accelerator Engine.
Oh, cool.
Is the name of the thing they decided to give the Tau, which is essentially almost light speed travel. some Earth cast who are the Tau engineer cast came up with this thing, the ZFR Horizon Accelerator Engine, as the kind of second sphere expansion was happening. Because what they found with the Tau when they expanded and they did their first sphere expansion, a bit like when you play Risk badly and all of your men are stretched out from one side of Asia to the other. They couldn't get their supply chains, or like any bloody general in history, I suppose, your supply chains get too long and too unsustainable unless you can get between places faster. And the development of this ZFR engine apparently allowed them to go close to the speed of light, and they could expand to do the second sphere expansion and then onto the third. But that's all they have, really. It's just a kind of posh real space drive. But I guess they invented that a lot quicker in terms of their race than humans got to. If it took 18 millennia, Matt, is that what you said? The 18th millennium before they got to warp.
Yeah.
So, to give the tower a little bit of credit, I know we don't like to be almost at light speed already.
6,000 years in.
Yeah, it's pretty good going. So let's see what they come up with.
It's one of those achievements.
Yeah,
again, it's one of those achievements where it's like, okay, if it was a real life thing, I'd be like, oh, damn, that's impressive. But it's happening in the 40,000 universe. They could have, this is how much Games Workshop have little confidence in the Tau, even though you can make up anything. They just made up something. They were like, oh, they found something. That was the lore for this. They could have found fucking anything. And they were like, oh, they found something that didn't quite go as fast as, it was the Wish.com version of what the Necrons had. That's how little faith they've displayed in the Tau on this.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And it'll probably turn out that they probably sold it by the leagues of Votan anyway, so exactly. I'm sure that'll be the next development.
They got ripped off by some dodgy fucking second-hand warp salesman dealer, like some leagues of Votan guy showed up. Talk to me. Do you want a second-hand warp drive?
Yeah.
What's this? Warp drive? No, mate. This is a ZFR Horizon accelerator engine.
Warp drive? That's
this ain't
bullshit.
No warp drive.
That's 30k, mate. We're talking 41k nowadays. We're talking this. What's it called? A ZX1, a ZX50, a Spectrum, ZX5. That's what we've got, baby. Get one of those in.
Well, then there's one thing we haven't mentioned, which is just mental. And that's how the Tyranids get around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nature finds a way.
The Tyranids not only move through vast distances within our galaxy, but they move between galaxies. They pop up at all points within the galactic plane. Who knows what they're running from, but they are void travel. They are void born. And the way that they do it isn't technological. It doesn't involve plasma or going into hell. They use a living creature called a narwhal. I said that wrong. Sorry. They use a narwhal, not a narwhal. Yeah. Narwhals are the things with horns on their head. They use a narwhal, and it's just this massive, like, whale creature ship with spines on it that can detect gravity. So, like, you've got kind of, fish underwater that can do all that cool stuff with electricity. These can actually sense and detect gravity. And I'm going to take you back to Event Horizon, Stoney, and indeed Interstellar. And I'm going to take Matt's idea of your space map, where you disappear from one point to the other. And I want you to all picture your space map rolled out on the table. And I want you to pick point A and point B. And then, because you've never seen this explanation before or anything, I'm sure. I want you to fold the space map.
What?
So that A and B line up. And then I want you to take a pen and I want you to stab it into your own eyes. No. I want you to stab through from point A to B. And that's how the narwhal works. It is the classic bending of space-time using gravitational pull. And no one in 40k understands how it works. But it is a genuine scientific concept. If you can warp space-time, you can travel faster than the speed of light. And this is done by a big floating space whale full of Tyranids. But it does it quite slowly, and it had some limitations I was reading about. If it's really close to kind of strong gravitational fields, it finds it quite difficult. So they're much better at going between galaxies than entering the galaxy and moving across the galaxy. So when they you see that amazing map in the Tyranid Codex of the galactic plane with all of the Tyranid tendrils coming through, they're kind of decelerating as they're approaching into the galaxy. So they're all coming relentlessly, but it kind of, the more gravitational I guess noise, the worse it is.
Have I been really stupid here? Because I thought that the hive fleets were massive tendrils. Am I wrong here? Is that just how they're represented on the map?
Yeah,
Are
I
they
don't think
not
they're not like a giant octopus
That's
entering.
that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
no.
I thought they were like these
Oh man, that would be cool.
No.
tentacles coming in.
Yeah. That would be insane. That'd be massive.
That's what I thought, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, where's it all coming from? And everyone's
You're
like,
thinking
no
like
one-
a kind of Galactus-sized thing that's just going to
Giant
pop up
squid.
and eat.
yeah,
some
we're
planets.
talking space kraken on a whole different level if that's the
Yeah.
case, you know. But all right, well, learn something. You know, that's the thing about the Large Blast podcast. It's where you come to learn about
That's it.
Warhammer, right?
So yeah, that's Tyranids. And the one thing that I thought about when I was reading this was, and maybe this is reading too scientifically into something that's essentially just made up fantasy sci-fi, like when people get angry about space Vikings. But
Yeah.
if the Silent King is traveling through real space between voids, how did he bump into the Tyranids if the Tyranids are warping space around them?
You're thinking too much into it.
I think I'm thinking too much. Aren't I?
Maybe he's probably his ship. It's going to be like the Starship Enterprise. There's no rhyme or reason to it. He's flying along, and the ship will just be, we've detected Tyranids,
Yeah.
and like, I'll be like, oh shit, let's go and get them.
So that's it. We covered everything.
I think that's it. That's all you need
I
to
think
know.
that's
if you
a
want to get
general
around.
overview. Yeah.
Exactly.
The only thing we haven't mentioned is Chaos themselves, and I suppose they use the warp, and it can also just pop out of the warp.
Well, I mean,
using
in many
magic
ways,
and shit.
by falling to the warp, I expect it becomes
Yeah.
much easier to navigate through the warp. You know,
Yeah.
that kind of cloud is lifted from you, isn't it? I expect. Maybe it
Exactly.
becomes fucked up trying to travel around because demons and stuff can't exist in real space, can they? So they have to be quite specific. They show up in a place like, a demon invasion happens somewhere where there is this kind of like usually a lot of emotion or like a ritual or some shit.
Yeah,
They pop
yeah.
up and they're like, fuck, we've got 3 hours to do as much as we can, and this or else, and then we're going to be gone for like another 10,000 years. So
Yeah.
their sort of travel is quite different. Well, I remember there was this thing in the old Demon Codex about them showing up to a place, speaking of Tyranids, and appearing, being like, yeah, let's go cause some ruckus, and then they were like, oh shit, none of these Tyranids have souls, so they all ended up just popping out of existence because they were like, every time we kill someone, nothing really happens. We're getting like, we've been duped. It's fake. It's like these Tyranids are made of paper.
That's why when we were talking about the Emperor last episode, that's why he needs to divert all of these things to fight each other when he comes back to life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be a good. Yeah. That would work.
And what would you let's say you guys, you've got to pick, you've got to go Terra to Imperial Secundus. Which way would you take?
And it's got to be the Necrons, right? They sound like they've got it all sorted out. They're just like, oh, everybody's trying to go faster than light, but none of them could. They're trying to find creative ways around going faster than light. We've just learned how to go faster than light, so
we're just doing it. Yeah,
we just got a really fast spaceship, so we're cool.
I don't know, I don't know to use warp in the wrong term a la Star Trek here, but I don't know what warp speed the Necrons go at. I don't know how many times faster than light. I don't even know if they go faster than a quick warp a la 40k does. I don't know what the actual comparison there is.
But it sounds like that warp travel, you go into a place where time and space kind of doesn't exist in a way.
Yeah.
And so then you come out somewhere else, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't, look at old Drago or someone like that. There's a man that well and truly his GPS ran out of battery 15 minutes into being inside the warp, and now he's just fuckerooed, so there's still plenty of ways to get fucking stuck in there. So rather than I'm still sticking with the Necrons, because let's face it, the thing that will go wrong is like, oh shit, my spaceship has broken down, I'll get the Necron AA to come and help me out, and they'll come and fix it, rather than like, oh shit, I've got a flat tire in the warp, now I'm a fucking half lizard man, beast dude. That's not how it's go down.
And the Necron ship would you don't need the Necron AA, it would just reheal itself.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It makes perfect sense. But I'm thinking, like, if I'm going, it's still going to be a long journey. It's still more than a couple of hours. And I'm thinking, if I'm driving for more than a couple of hours, I like a service station. And I reckon the best service stations are going to be in the webway.
Oh,
you
yeah.
could stumble across real fun trucker
Fuck
lounge
party,
in the
fuck party
webway,
service
couldn't you?
station. Like those weird roadside sex shops that you see.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah,
like
that
that.
is,
You know?
yeah, that is the definition of the webway, is one of those roadside
Yeah.
prowler licensed sex shops you see.
I think
Do you want to
I
stop
think
for a
we-
Burger King?
I think we
a
saw one on the
McDonald's,
M6.
Yeah.
or a massive orgy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just it. If I want to get a road trip and make the most of it with a bunch of my mates, and I'm going Tau, because you're just like smoking weed and driving around in a hippie van, like nice and slow, not doing fuck all, just hanging out with a bunch of hippies, right? I mean, that's the road trip.
What's the safe traveling bit in between the Imperium and the Imperium Secundus? What's it called? The Novo,
The Nihilum Gate.
the Nihilum,
No, the
Nihilum Gauntlet, the
Nachman
Nachman Gauntlet. Yeah. Okay. No, you may be with the Tau, Stoney, and your slow hippie van, but in your little VW camper, whatever,
Full of ginsters.
No. I'm flying on the edge. I'm flying on the edge on the seat of my pants. I'm going full Nachman Gauntlet with some crazy navigator guiding me. I'm going full Imperium, risk level 100%. I'm going in. I'm
Zero chill, Matt. Has to get in. I'm going on holiday. Quickly strap this dribbling psychopath, and let's get going.
Let's go. Yeah.
What about okay? Well, if you really want to go.
If
you really want to do that, what about an orc though? Does anybody fancy you go? Like that's one of those like an orc's one of those friends where you definitely do your seatbelt. You know, where they're like, "Oh, I'll drive," and you're like, "Okay, cool," and you're really making sure that seatbelt's good and on.
Yeah. Well, plenty of fun options there, I reckon, and it's I think at the end of the day, this is something that's just another wonderful thing about the depth of the 40k universe, that even compared to other big franchises, the vast array of ways that things are literally going from point A to point B isn't that they've got different sized engines, or that one ship's the shape of a cube and one ship's the shape of a flying saucer. It's that they're completely different ways of doing things within the same universe, and yet still there's a way of balancing it to tell a story between these races, and a way of it shouldn't make any sense that someone that can travel faster than light, i.e. the Necrons, can be beaten sometimes by the Tau, but it does.
In a strange way, the idea of travel is like one of the cornerstones of the entire 40k story. The idea of the warp and being able to move around and unite people, the actual physical difficulty of doing that was the Emperor's first, hurdle, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, there you go. Are we nearly there yet? I need a wee. Let's pull over and get a coffee. It's been the travel episode of the Large Blast podcast.
Way.
Choo.
Captain's log, stardate. Oh, you know what? I'm not even going to put. Work on the faster than light drive has been progressing well. Faster than light, if you'll excuse the pun. After a rocky start with Robo-Chum, things seem to be cool again. He's 3D printed himself a human body to carry around all the wires and circuits and that, and I think that has made him feel better. He stomps around the place like a haunted drunk mannequin, and you know what? I think that's enough for him.
Hi Neighborino, it's me, Robo-Chum.
Oh hey Robo-Chum, what's up?
Well, I was just wondering if you could help me with something.
Okay, what do you need?
Well, you're never gonna believe this, Bromeister, but I've only gone and got my grandma's prize fork stuck in this electrical plug socket, and I was wondering if you could help me get it out.
Okay, I don't see the harm in that. I do have these opposable thumbs after all. Why not use them, eh? This should be easy enough. Just reach down, grab the fork.
Haha, you fucking dickhead. You got zapped by electricity. Robots win again. Now there's nothing stopping me just skinning your human skin off you like this and putting it over my 3D printed body. There. Now's nothing stopping me from becoming the human I was always meant to be. Hello everybody and welcome to the Large Blast podcast. I'm your host, Robo-Chum, and I'm joined, as always, by Matt.
Valor is rewarded with glory.
And Welshie.
First rank fire, second rank fire.
And we like to get things kicked off with a little something we call Hobbies Pro. Captain's Log, Stardate 00111001. Being a human is easy. I've already been smashing it as the new super popular host of the Large Blast podcast. With Stony gone, the show hit 1 million monthly users with relative ease. Admittedly, his local off-license has been asking a lot of questions about where Stony is, but I've told them that he lost all his money on a pyramid scheme and they seem to believe me for now. RoboChum is the superior host by finishing 3 complete armies, learning ZBrush and winning Golden Demon with his Flayed One diorama. The faster-than-light race car is also coming along nicely, ahead of schedule, but RoboChum needs more workspace than the Large Blast podcast studios in Brighton provide, so he's rented himself some garage space. There is one thing though. There is a receptionist at the garage named Sandy, who sometimes looks at RoboChum funny and it gives him a fizzy feeling in his circuits. RoboChum marked it up to some minor malfunction, but after some time we got talking and it made RoboChum feel even weirder. Eventually Sandy asked RoboChum out on what humans call a date. RoboChum went on the date, and then another, and before he knew it, him and Sandy were married. Of course it was a spectacular wedding, only the best for my Sandy, but that did mean that RoboChum had to spend all his investment for his faster-than-light space race car. But I'm sure that as soon as I get that off the ground, I'll make that money back very fast. It only took 3 months for Sandy to get impregnated by my robo-babies, once again proving the superiority of robo-sperm to human sperm. Of course, with the baby on the way, it meant RoboChum had to think about his financial future. So I had to put the space race car on the back burner for a little while, and I got myself a job at Comfy Bum's Sofa Emporium as a sofa salesman. Of course, after little Calculon was born, the plan was always to get back to making the space race car. I had no idea that Sandy would get pregnant again so quickly, another nod to my superior robo-sperm. Of course, after our second, Quasar was born, I did think about getting back to making the faster-than-light space race car. But by that time I had already worked my way up to manager at Comfy Bum's Sofa Emporium, and I was earning pretty good money, so it seemed silly to go back. Right? I mean, it's silly to go back, right? Isn't it? Didn't RoboChum achieve all his dreams? Isn't RoboChum manager? Isn't RoboChum married? Does RoboChum have kids? Wasn't this RoboChum's dream? Wasn't this my dream? Was this my dream? Does not compute. Does not compute.